Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Southbank Live. My name is Boaz Shoshan and I'm joined today by our in-house tech expert, Sam Volkering. Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. If you are watching this live or if you are indeed watching a recording, do feel free to leave any comments in the live chat box or in the comment section below this video. Now, Sam, in terms of what you've been looking at this week, we've seen a lot of action in the markets, some good, some bad, depending on where you stand. Is there any specific topics you'd like to discuss this week?
As usual, where do we start when it comes to all this? I think it would be remiss of us not to touch on the crypto markets. As you know, and hopefully people who are watching will know that, I'm pretty immersed in those markets on a regular basis. So it would be, like I say, remiss not to us to talk about the fact that Bitcoin's now touching and even just creeped a little bit past $60,000 again. I think that's a pretty good place to start.
Yes, certainly. It has been a wild market. Well, every week for crypto is a wild week, isn't it? But it has been a very positive week for Bitcoin. I think the Taproot upgrade that is going to be hitting Bitcoin, I think it's next month now. It's only a few weeks away, really. Is definitely something that's being anticipated by the market here. Sam, you actually sent me an article recently, which I very much enjoyed. Something that happened earlier this week, and it's something that I'd like to share with the chat, with the chat, and with those watching this video today. This one, it comes as part of our reading between the headlines segment, where we do take some of the news headlines from the week and try to figure out what's really going on and some of the big investment themes that are going on underneath it. Now, for anybody watching this, if we actually get the first image, we put that up on the screen right now. I would be very interested if anybody watching could guess who it was that said this earlier this week. So I'll just read this out. It's a quote from a quite distinguished, high-profile person who says, "The US sovereign debt is growing. Congress has once again increased the sovereign debt ceiling. What does this mean? Money printing. What would be the result? Higher inflation. This is probably the first time inflation in the United States is growing at a speed that has not been seen for quite a while. These are economic reasons that undermine confidence in a currency. Everyone is asking themselves, what next? What will the US economic authorities do with this huge debt? What will they do? Manipulate the dollar and depreciate its value? What will they do with the debt?" Now, these are all very, very good questions, very good observations, I would say. But for anybody who is watching this live in the chat, if you can actually just post who you think this is, and we'll read some of them out. But Sam, just addressing the content there, just addressing that quote, what would you make of that? Are we going to see money printing? Is the sovereign debt issue the US has? Is this going to lead to higher inflation?
The questions in that are just, they're questions I think we've been asking for the last decade, isn't it? It's the same thing over and over and over. I remember it had to have been literally 10 years ago now, where everyone was just asking, what are they going to do? They're just going to keep kicking the can down the road with quantitative ease. And that's all they've been doing, is kicking the can down the road. The can's just getting bigger and bigger. It's like this whole, I love how they call it a debt ceiling in the US, right? Because ceiling kind of indicates that it's, it doesn't get any higher than that. And yet every single time the US reaches their debt ceiling, they just continue to make it higher and higher.
Just raise it again.
And higher, and just raise it again and bust through it again. It's like, why even call it a ceiling? Just call it like the debt elevator, the debt stairway to heaven or something like that. And look, everyone knows that this leads to inflation. I don't see how anyone can deny that it doesn't lead to inflation. And we're now starting to see that really kick in. I think it was just literally this week, I think they reported something like 5% inflation. I can't remember the exact number.
Yes, 5%.
That's ridiculous. You can see that people are posting pictures online in social media of like a gallon of milk costing like $10. It is obscene that the people in power, the central bankers, the decision makers around monetary and fiscal policy, all think and keep pushing this rhetoric that it's just a temporary thing. The printing that has been put in place for over a decade now and continues to happen only leads to more inflation.
Yeah, it is interesting seeing how everyone is blaming supply chains now as the main cause of inflation, rather than any money printing. It seems to be the easy sort of deflection that you can make is just to blame it on supply chains because supply chains have gotten mangled. And yeah, I mean, it does seem like inflation is definitely here. And a lot of the people who thought inflation was going to just be transitory, I think they're changing their tune. But maybe it will be, maybe it will all go away. We'll have to wait and see. Regarding that quote on US debt ceiling and that the US is going to need to paper it over with money printing, that came from Vladimir Putin in an interview that he gave with CNBC recently. If anyone was watching the news much, you probably will have seen him being lambasted for being a sexist in this. This is actually what gave it the most publicity rather than anything that he was really commenting on economic matters. I believe he referred to the interviewer as pretty and beautiful, and this was seen as a very, very bad thing. But he did actually have some very interesting things to say. It's interesting seeing a world leader like Putin talk about the currency issues, the debt issues, the inflation issues in a very reasonable, easy to understand way. And you don't really see that from many other world leaders at the moment. So if we just go to our second image here. Well, actually, earlier on in that conversation, this is from CNBC. Russia's Putin says crypto has value, but maybe not for trading oil. And this was another part of the interview that was given by Hadley Gamble. This is the lady who was referred to as pretty and beautiful, and this is a very, very bad thing for him to have said. But if we go to our third image, there was a very interesting quote from Putin again regarding Bitcoin, or actually just regarding cryptocurrency in general. So the interviewer asks, Mr. Novak a few months ago suggested that we were going to see oil contracts denominated in something other than US dollars. Novak, by the way, is a very senior Russian politician. I believe he's the prime minister in Russia, possibly in crypto. When do you think we will see that happen? Putin says, contracts in crypto, this seems premature. Of course, cryptocurrency can be used in settlements, but it is very unstable. It is fine for transferring funds from one place to another, but I think it would be premature to use it in trading, especially when dealing with energy resources. So far, cryptocurrency has lacked any backing. It is legitimate and can be used in settlements, no doubt about that, but it is too early to use for trading in oil or for other raw materials and energy sources. However, things change, and everything has the right to exist. We will see how this will go from here. Maybe crypto will one day be used to store value, but we see how the market fluctuates, so it seems too early for that now. Very, very interesting comments there from Putin. It doesn't seem to have gotten too much play in the media, Sam. But what would you make of that? Because it's I can't think of any other world leaders who've really been regarding giving crypto such a fair shake.
Yeah, so this isn't surprising for a number of reasons, and I think probably the first and foremost reason is that it's kind of the opposite stance to what we're getting from politicians. Well, not all of them, to be fair, but for a lot of politicians and regulators in the US, in the UK, in Europe, and certainly parts of Asia, is that the current sort of position is that the crypto space needs more regulation. It needs to be regulated. It's dangerous. Your consumers are at risk. House is going to burn down, kind of thing. Where it seems that Putin has kind of figured out that perhaps taking a more open stance to how it could be used or utilized is probably not a bad idea. What's interesting is that it's completely diametrically opposed to what China's saying, which is a little strange. But at the same time, I think he realizes and appreciates that it could become a significant contributor to the Russian economy if dealt with in the right way. His comments on it in the energy markets not being ready for that aren't surprising. But the openness to that it could be, I think, look, Russia has its issues, but you can't deny that that is a pretty significant open stance to have for the wider crypto markets and for how it could be used. So it's certainly different to how most of the Western world is treating cryptocurrency at the moment.
Yeah, certainly. For those interested who are watching this, there is a full transcript of that interview available on the Kremlin's own website. They've very nicely put it up there, the CNBC interview. So there is a link to that in the description. It is in Russian, obviously, but at the bottom of the page there is a button you can click to translate it through to English and give it a read, because it is a very fascinating interview. They do cover a lot of different bases, and it is interesting hearing Putin's thoughts, whatever you do think of his actions, because of course he's a very, very influential figure. Part of that conversation was all about avoiding the US dollar. Putin was saying the US, I believe the metaphor he used was cutting off the branch that it is sitting on by sanctioning other currencies for using dollars, and saying, we have no choice but to use things other than dollars. So it's not really too much of a surprise they're interested in crypto. If memory serves, Sam, Vitalik Buterin, one of the founders of Ethereum, he had a chat with Putin himself a few years back about creating an actual sovereign crypto for Russia. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I can't remember if he was, so I can't remember if it was 2013 or if it was the 2016.
I think it was 16.
Because there was so much FOMO, fear of missing out, and hype around a Rus coin, a Russia coin, basically a crypto that would be a crypto for Russia. And it wasn't government sanctioned or anything like that, but it was one of the earliest, I guess it was one of the earliest altcoin bubbles when everyone was like, okay, so the next big thing is going to be crypto for nation states. And so, Russia's going to have its own coin and everyone's going to have its own coin. It sort of ignored the fact that there's a whole heap of regulation and authority that needs to approve these sorts of things. You can't just make a Russia coin and then hope that the Kremlin's going to just go, oh, cool, thanks for that, and run away with it. So that kind of boomed and busted. So that was an interesting time. But yeah, the idea, I distinctly remember that there was so much excitement around the idea that Russia would accept cryptocurrency. And to be fair, there's still kind of that same thing, is that a big superpower effectively decides to go pro crypto in that sense, and open the doors, open the floodgates to the development of cryptocurrencies, to encouraging innovation, companies that are involved in building out crypto networks, blockchain networks, distributed ledger technology, all the ins and outs that come with it. For a big country, like, it's one thing, for example, for El Salvador to say we're going to accept Bitcoin as legal tender and then roll out the technology for it, and to really start to get involved in it in a big way. But for, like I say, one of the world's largest superpowers to do it, all of a sudden that, it's weird. It kind of, I think it vindicates in people's minds, or at least in the mainstream mind, that this is a legitimate thing, that it's not going away. I mean, we're well past that point. Like, we reached that whole, this is legitimate, not going away point probably 5 or 6 years ago. But it takes the mainstream a bit of time to catch up to that, and to try and shake that it's going to zero mentality that they have. So yeah, when Putin starts to talk about it in an open sense, there will be people that will be like, oh, it's only used for money laundering and terrorist financing, and Russia's a big part of that. And there'll be the conspiracy theorists that think it's all tulip bubbles and going to zero again, but they'd be wrong, as usual. So, like I say, it's just that it's an open conversation, which is, it's actually nice to see someone in great power having open thoughts about its potential use cases.
Yeah, it is interesting to see somebody say, well, we don't know. Well, it's quite unstable at the moment, but everything has a right to exist, as Putin says, and we'll just see what happens, rather than simply saying, no, this is bad, or yes, this is very good. It is interesting to see. So it's slightly more reasonable when you think of it that way, isn't it? Now, for everybody who has just tuned in, thank you very much for that. We do have a very lively chat at the moment, Sam. All manner of questions we're getting through here, and just general commentary, which is always good. Just in terms of, if we stay on Bitcoin for the moment,
sure.
And on the topic of things like what Russia is doing. So we've got Jay here who says, perhaps Mr. Putin sees Bitcoin as a nice way to get around sanctions, which I think that's definitely part of the conversation with Russia and with Bitcoin in general. As I say, that interview was all about Russia trying to avoid dollar sanctions, and Bitcoin is a good way of that.
To be fair, why wouldn't you? Like, if you're Putin and the US has put sanctions on you, of course you're going to look at other ways to get around those sanctions. Who says that those sanctions are legitimate anyway? I mean, like, it's just the US's view on things. There's a deep political dive we could go into, a whole bunch of reasons for things, but
Certainly.
So what?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you put yourself in Putin's position and you're simply playing the game, I mean, obviously you're going to look for alternatives, and that's what they've done.
Yeah.
One thing that Putin also says in that interview was how global dollar reserves have been declining. So statistically, no matter how you really look at it, the dollar's reserve status is being eroded, and Putin says it's because of these sanctions. So I think it's certainly a big part of that. Jay also says the US has printed trillions of bucks, and people on the street are surprised to see inflation. Well, yeah, well, certainly a lot of economists seem to be reacting quite surprised to the high inflation that we've had. But it does seem like the everyman is definitely becoming much more attuned to the higher cost of everything. I mean, Sam, in terms of your thoughts on inflation generally, looking a little further out, do you think it's definitely here to stay? Where is it back to a sort of 1970s kind of world, or is this something quite different?
Yeah, look, I'm genuinely worried that it's here to stay. This is like I'm so shocked that economists are like, wow, we're really surprised to see inflation. I was like, how did you not see? How bad are you at being an economist to not think this was coming? So look, and look, for the average person, the average investor, the thing that hits the most is the price of goods at the shop, your energy bills, how much it costs to fill your car. All these things are going up. The cost of meat, dairy, everything is rising, and wages aren't going to rise at the same pace that these, the things that impact people every day are going to rise. And so you kind of got to think to yourself, if this is set in and kicking in, there's really only one thing, and I've said this for a while, there's only one thing that the central bank can do to really stem inflation, and that's to raise rates. And they're in between a rock and an even harder rock, and an even harder rock than that hard rock. Because if they keep rates low, they keep money printing, inflation's only going to get worse. If they raise rates, they need to raise them fast, and they need to raise them hard to really stamp inflation out, which is going to have a massive impact on the housing market and lending and economic growth, and really cut that off at the head, which needs to happen, in my view. So that's going to have ramifications of its own for what is in places like the UK or like Canada or like Australia or pretty much everywhere that is a massively property driven economy. That's going to have serious ramifications in its own self. I worry that it's here to stay. And look, this is part of why I'm very, very bullish on Bitcoin and basically the crypto economy and the wider crypto ecosystem, is because for me, from the very outset, I've said Bitcoin is one of the best plays against inflation that you can make, because as inflation continues to kick in like this, a deflationary asset like Bitcoin with limited supply and increasing demand, in my view, there's that causes a pretty strong case for higher Bitcoin prices in the long term.
It is a very interesting place where we're at with Bitcoin right at the moment. We are now getting much more into the festive season. Festive seasons have generally been kind of positive for Bitcoin, certainly if we're thinking back to the 2017 era. I think we should probably get on to sort of the main theme of today's episode, which of course is the Taproot upgrade. We do have a few questions about that in general. So it's a couple of viewers, Debbie and Paul, asking, can you buy Taproot? Taproot is not a specific type of token. It is an upgrade to the Bitcoin network in general. So Bitcoin is simply going to be getting better once this has been implemented next month. And as a result, myself and Sam, I think we're both in agreement, think it'll be a very positive catalyst for the Bitcoin space in general. Sam, tell us a bit about Taproot.
Yeah, so I mean, Bitcoin is effectively a code. It's computer code that creates a network, and that network has become a monetary network. So in my view, Bitcoin can be viewed as money. And like good software, good code can be, it can be upgraded and made better. And we've seen in the past upgrades come to Bitcoin's network to improve it. We saw, there's been a number of upgrades. There's a number of small upgrades that happen over time. But in terms of really large upgrades to the whole network, they don't happen that regularly.
No.
But when they do, they require the entire network to approve it for them to actually happen. And as the Bitcoin network gets bigger and gets more robust and it has more nodes and it has more miners and it has more participants and more transactions, all those sorts of things. When big upgrades come, it's quite significant, really. Like, it's kind of one thing when the network was smaller to push through upgrades, but now the size of the network we're talking about $1 trillion network. That's a significant shift. And what we're seeing coming with Taproot is, I think it really bubbles down to two key elements. And that's around privacy and around, I guess, unlocking Bitcoin for a more robust decentralized finance network, or DeFi as people will maybe have heard of it before. We saw an upgrade come in 2017, I think it was, the SegWit upgrade, which, again, we use terms like SegWit and Taproot. These are what the upgrades are called. What that actually means is it just means there's a better code, better programming that's coming to the network. How that actually works, if you're technically minded, go and have a look, right? So Bitcoin's network is open source. Anyone can go and see how it works. Even if you're Jamie Dimon and have 5 minutes just to check out the actual code, you can go and do that. So if you want to check out the technical nature of it, go and have a look. But the core thing that people need to understand is that the network is getting better. And so if you view Bitcoin as money is getting better. And the key elements of that, I think, are certainly based around the DeFi and the privacy aspect of it.
Sam, End of the World says, thoughts on DLT versus the new Taproot for sending Bitcoin peer-to-peer. I am assuming that DLT in this context refers to distributed ledger technology. Have you any thoughts on that?
I'm a little confused about the question, to be honest, because Bitcoin is effectively distributed ledger technology. The Taproot upgrade will help. It's certainly, from what I've read and understand, it will help layer 2 applications. So applications that are built on top of Bitcoin's network so things like the Lightning Network, it should assist in making Lightning more efficient and faster. That's already pretty fast. So that you can utilize Bitcoin certainly as a store of value, but then with layer 2 applications, you can also use it as a payment network for faster transactions. So that is certainly something that can happen. There are other crypto networks, other blockchains, other types of decentralized ledger technology that certainly have applications to do that as well, and can do that equally as well or fast. I think what people need to really get their head around is that you should really look at Bitcoin in isolation and look at a lot of other of the cryptocurrency networks and technologies as technology plays. So Bitcoin's kind of money, and the others are more around technology. So it's kind of like viewing as something as money, and the internet is a sort of great black and white way to look at it.
Yeah.
A little bit more gray area than that, but you can't just bundle everything. I've said this before many times. You can't just bundle it all under one definition. Ethereum's not the same as Bitcoin. It's not the same as Solana. It's not the same as Tezos. They all bring different aspects to the party, and to look at them all as one is a mistake. You need to look at things a bit more in isolation.
Yes, it's Bitcoin combines so many different things. You end up having it's a blend of the internet and philosophy and Austrian economics and network effects all bundled together. And nobody has really, to my knowledge, I don't think we'll actually know what Bitcoin truly is until it's been around for a lot longer in terms of what it actually means for the world in general. I think will only be able to be appreciated back in hindsight. So it sounded like when you were saying earlier how we already, the Bitcoin was already too big to ignore, probably about 5 years ago, but we can only really sort of appreciate that in hindsight when we're looking back on it. It'll be very interesting to see, in 10 years time, what we believe Bitcoin is and what it means in general. Now, we do have a couple of questions here, which are a question we can't really answer. So, for example, Enderman asks, should I buy gold? And another one says, buy Bitcoin. It's the highest performing asset for 10 years. We can't give financial advice, and we certainly can't give financial advice just based on past performance like that. So I'm afraid we can't tell you what to do with your money on the show. This is for informational and hopefully some entertainment purposes only. Debbie does ask, in terms of where would be a good place to actually buy Bitcoin in the first place. I think this is just in general as a sort of public safety announcement. There are plenty of bad actors out there who scam people with will sell you Bitcoin, things like that. So Sam, just in terms of safe places where somebody, if they are interested in acquiring any Bitcoin, where they should go just to start, and very user-friendly places.
Yeah, cool. So look, I just want to preface what I'm going to say and the kinds of places you can get it with something that I think a lot of people don't understand about the crypto world. Is there's this belief that it is unregulated and there's no oversight and it's completely dangerous and boogeyman stuff, right? There are a number of crypto asset firms that have licenses from the Financial Conduct Authority, from the FCA, the regulator in the UK. A number of them have e-money and money licenses so that they can abide by all the kinds of anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing regulations that are put in place. And on the FCA website, you can see a list of crypto asset firms that are covered by the FCA. So they include like Gemini is one that has approval for that license as a crypto asset firm in the UK. There are a number that exist under temporary licenses as crypto asset firms as well. So there's a number, right? So Gemini is a great place to start. I know Bottle Pay is another that you can buy Bitcoin through only. That has one of the temporary licenses. There's a whole bunch. So do you know what? One of the best places that you can start, and we can maybe put this link on the Southbank Twitter page or something afterwards. There you can go to the FCA website and see all the businesses that have those regulation coverages in places. So yeah, look, there's a number of places. I would start looking at, like I say, Gemini, Coinbase, Bottle Pay. There's another that's a UK listed company, Mode Global Holdings. They have an app, which again, it's Bitcoin only, but again, it's another way. They're, like I say, they're a listed business on the London Stock Exchange. They're all good places to start.
Very good, very good. Debbie, if you are interested in acquiring any Bitcoin, or you just want to look at it, look into it, should I say, as you hear it from Sam, looking at Gemini, Coinbase, Bottle Pay. I think these are they're both, well, all three of those are very easy to get started with if you are interested in that. Now we do have plenty more questions now on crypto. We're going much more into the weeds here. So from Baggio, I believe that's how it's spelled. I hope so. Sam, what do you think about the excessively high Ethereum transaction fees? Very good question.
Yeah.
What do you make of those? This is like we've got our own energy crisis here in the UK with very high fuel costs, but in Ethereum, this has been a crisis that's been raging for quite some time.
Yeah, massive problem. I mean, it makes Ethereum unusable for people that want to make small transactions on Ethereum's network. And that's exactly why we've seen other crypto networks that are cheaper fees, faster transactions, absolutely skyrocket in the last couple of years, because Ethereum has become unusable for a lot of people. Like minting an NFT on Ethereum could cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of Ethereum. That's ridiculous. And they continue to say that they will upgrade the network to deliver faster transactions, lower cost transactions, and all those sorts of things, which we're yet to see. I still think they'll do it. And I still think when you look at the long-term picture of what Ethereum can do and the amount of developers that are developing and building on Ethereum, I think there's still a very good case for Ethereum long-term as many other crypto networks. So you've got to balance out what's happening now with what's coming and what's happening in the future. But it's ridiculous. You can't use it. And it's an issue that doesn't just face Ethereum. It's this idea around composability and them being fit for purpose, which right now Ethereum's not.
Yeah, it does seem hard to understand how they're competing to rival the fiat money network, the fiat money world that we're in at the moment, when transaction fees are so high on Ethereum. You really need to be more efficient if you want to disrupt the your competitor. It's almost like if the combustion engine was invented and somebody started an automobile company, but they couldn't make any of their cars go faster than a horse. You're just not going to make any progress that way. So it will be interesting to see how Ethereum, if it does manage to solve that problem, how they'll do it, things like that. Another question. This one is very good from Michael. Good afternoon, Michael. What I don't get is who are the people or the organizations deciding the upgrade if it is in fact a decentralized network? So Sam, we've got Taproot coming out next week. Well, not next week, sorry, in next month. How can Bitcoin be decentralized when everybody is effectively choosing to participate? But it's not exact. It doesn't need to be everybody who does actually vote for it, right?
Yeah, no. Usually with these sorts of upgrades, there's I guess a threshold, a quota that needs to be reached in order for it to activate. I think it was about 70% for Taproot to get activated. So again, it requires a considerable majority of the network to approve it. And it's the miners and the node operators that upgrade the software. They can choose not to, and they can stick with the old version. And if the majority decide to do that, then the upgrade doesn't come through. Or you can end up with a hard fork. You can end up with a split network, which is what we saw in 2017 with SegWit, and that's how we ended up with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. And so effectively, you then leave the participants in the network, the miners, the nodes, the people making transactions to decide what they want to go with. And it's pretty overwhelming that when you see a hard fork like that, what we saw in 2017, the split with Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, is that the majority went with Bitcoin. And so that's the beauty about these networks as well, being open source and being a purely free market for anyone to decide how they want to apply it going forward. And the majority effectively wins. The stronger block, the stronger blockchain, those that choose to follow that more than another, that's where we end up. So it isn't just the central bankers of Bitcoin deciding this; it's the entire network. And like I say, the bigger the network gets, the decisions that once they reach that majority, once they pass, that the entire network is on board with it. It's almost like the bigger and more powerful the network becomes, the bigger and more powerful these upgrades and decisions are, because it's better for everyone.
Yeah, I believe.
It's really the democratization of decision making as well in that sense.
Yeah, it's the meaning of consensus really comes into play there when you see the network adopt new protocols as a result of somebody proposing an idea effectively and everybody then integrating it, rather than the joint committee at the top deciding what the new policy is going to be and everybody just having to take it. Very lively chat today. It is very good to see all manner of comments here in terms of. Before we get on to our long short segment, which I'd like to do, if we just take another look here, let's see. Just in terms of, somebody does comment on how PayPal is allowing crypto purchases now. That's from Apex Cypher. Well, Apex Cypher says don't buy from PayPal because you don't actually own Bitcoin through them, which is a very shrewd analysis there from Apex.
Fair point, though.
Yeah, it is, Sam, because you've written about this, and as have I actually. Before they, a while back, I think it was last year when they announced it.
Yeah.
There, when you do buy Bitcoin through PayPal, you can't actually withdraw it, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I've got £20 worth of Bitcoin sitting in my PayPal crypto account because I wanted to demonstrate how it can be done. And look, there's good and bad things about something like PayPal, right? And it may only be a temporary thing, but you can buy Bitcoin and Ethereum and a couple others on PayPal now very easily. So if you've got a PayPal account, it's literally like click, buy. So there's an element of when a big multinational like that decides to allow this in the UK, it kind of does say to the banks that continuously block people's transactions who are trying to buy crypto, it's a bit of an FU. I promised I wouldn't swear on the live show, but I can use abbreviations. It's a bit of an FU to the banking system to say, you know what, you guys are idiots, really, because this isn't what you make it out to be. So I like that PayPal has done that, and others around the world are doing that as well. But the issue is that if you did buy Bitcoin, for example, through your PayPal account, you can't actually withdraw the Bitcoin. So you couldn't send it to your own wallet that you self-custody, that you run yourself and protect yourself. So there's a bit of an issue with that in terms of there is still a third-party risk there that, if PayPal decided to suspend your account and you couldn't access it, then you couldn't access your crypto in there either. So that aspect of it, I don't like, is that you kind of own it, but you don't really own it. I don't believe you actually own crypto until you have the freedom to move it and send it wherever the hell you want. I think it's probably going to be a temporary thing with PayPal. That's just my view on it. It's good and bad. They've made it easy for people to get it, but they've made it difficult for people to really have that self-custody element over it.
Yeah, it's almost like a gateway drug where they've allowed everybody, well, it's very, very easy now to get some exposure to it, but you're not actually owning sort of your own Bitcoin. It's going against some of the principles of Bitcoin of individual sovereignty and being able to control your own money. Lynette asks, what is the minimum amount of Bitcoin that one person can buy? Now, of course, each Bitcoin is split up into what is 100 million Satoshis that each one is split up into, Sam. But of course, when it comes to actually, if you did want to buy just one Satoshi, you'd find it very, very hard to do, because who's going to go to the trouble of setting up a fiat payment rail that would allow you to buy only one. One that you noted earlier, Sam, BottlePay, the app that you get, which is actually a UK app, British company.
Yep.
They do allow you to buy Bitcoin in very, very, very small amounts. And I think it's 1% they charge on the transfer there. Which is pretty competitive, all things considered. You can't send Satoshis to anybody using the BottlePay app. It's quite interesting. But of course, we don't have any commercial relationship with BottlePay, and at the same time, we can't give any financial advice on this show. Just looking through, actually, Sam, let's sort of change gears slightly and go into our long short segment for today. So for anybody watching, we started doing this quite recently. The long short segment is where we take one of our guests and we ask them to give a long and a short. So if you ever know what a futures contract is, if you're long a future, that means you're bullish on that contract. You've bought that contract and you want it to appreciate over time. Whereas if you are short that contract, you've sold it, that means you're quite bearish on that asset. So Sam, could you give us a long and a short for this week, just in general, how you're feeling on the markets at the minute? Of course, this is just for fun. This is not something that we're telling you to go out and trade as a result of what Sam says here. But yeah, what would be your long and your short for this week?
Sure. I just want to quickly add before that is that in pure answer to that previous question, I know I think as much as I've sort of said PayPal is kind of good and bad, I know their minimum amount is like £1 that you can buy Bitcoin. And like you say, others like BottlePay, it could be a $5, right, or a $10. So really small amounts if you wanted to. So anyway, onto the long and to the short. So should I start with the long or should I start with the short? What do you reckon?
Let's see. Let's start with the bad news, right? Let's start with the bad news.
Okay. So I assume that's the short. Yeah. I said this sort of to you before we started, is that I'm all for new technologies, breakthrough technology that can improve legacy systems that we've got that are fractured and full of friction and centralized authority. Very much don't like those kinds of legacy networks. And so I'm very much for things like, the green technologies that are helping to make cars cleaner, more efficient, travel further distances, all these sorts of things, solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, nuclear. I'm very much for nuclear energy, as much as people have this weird idea that nuclear energy is going to destroy the earth and blow us all up. Not happening. But anyway, so I'm all for technologies that can improve how we live, make the cost of living cheaper, and yet still be beneficial for the environment and not destroy and kill the environment. But I am short ESG and green ETFs because, frankly, I think they're a whole heap of hogwash. And I think the average investor and the person that consumes information online and has a bit of awareness around the world, has kind of switched on to the fact that a lot of these kinds of ESG funds are a bit of a crock of what. And so I think that we'll find that investors will start to really shift money away from ETFs and passive investing and start to really take that control of their investment decisions back for themselves. And I think that the first place that that's really going to hit is these ESG funds, because people will just see through the facade that they're really not as ESG friendly as they make out to be, that it's more a marketing ploy for what these things are called rather than what they actually do.
Yeah, what makes you, is there anything in particular that you've seen happen recently, Sam, that makes you feel that way?
So it's sort of a combination of factors. It's a combination of factors that I think that the passive investing days are somewhat over anyway. I think there will be a shift back to more active investing and people taking a far greater interest in micro decisions around their portfolios. That's part of it. I think another part of it is that when people look at their energy bills and they see that they're skyrocketing and they ask themselves, why the hell is my energy bill twice as much as it was 5 years ago? They'll realize that maybe some of these green technologies, while they're good, and that there are micro opportunities for individual company selection and things like that to make money from some of the great things happening, that when you look at the broader industry, is that it has not delivered to people's hip pockets. And that's where people live, in the here and now, not in the 10 years. Like, okay, it'll be great if my bill was cheaper in 10 years time, but right now it's not. And that pisses me off. I'm sorry, I had to drop something in.
Oh.
And I think I'm not the only person watching us today or that reads our stuff that is in the same camp. You don't want to see the cost of your stakes rising. You don't want to see, this is why it all sort of comes under, it's not just inflation and money printing that impacts all these things. It's technologies that haven't delivered the promise that they had not coming into effect. It's the fact that, they're switching off coal plants and trying to get renewable energy as the main source of energy in the country. And the fact of the matter is it's not enough. So they need to be switched back on, or we need to look at more nuclear power and bringing more nuclear reactors on board to fill an energy void that is quite clearly there. So I just think people are just going to start to see through the BS that comes with a lot of these ESG funds, realizing that at the end of the day, unless it actually helps people live a cheaper, more enriched life, which currently it's not, they're going to shift away from those kinds of funds.
Right, Kay and Talala ask, what is ESG? I apologize, we should have clarified that a little better. ESG refers to environmental, societal, and governance standards. When it comes to specifically when it's being applied to investing, when it's being applied to companies which operate in ways which have some kind of vested interest in that. And when it comes to societal standards, that really applies to everyone. So ESG has become very popular of late, very much over the last couple of years. Though specifically, during the lockdowns, it really heated up a lot. ESG, the acronym has been around for a while, but it's become very popular these days for companies to get sort of the rubber stamp of being ESG compliant, and that means what they have arranged their operations in a certain way that makes them look like they are making good action, making positive outside of the bounds of their own business. They are making some kind of positive change when it comes to either the environment, society, or to governance. Now these are quite vague terms when you think about it, because you can do all manner of things to make yourself more societally positive and make your governance better. I mean, ultimately, all these businesses should be interested in good governance. What one man's good governance is not the same as another one's. So it's kind of wishy-washy. And so Sam refers to sort of a practice known as greenwashing, where companies which are really just only interested in making some money as part of a PR and a marketing stunt, but they will make a big deal out of being very green. So they will make themselves look very self-righteous, and they really care about society and the government, when actually all they've done is just spend a bit of money on maybe some nice adverts. They've maybe thrown a little slush budget towards some kind of research technology, which probably won't see much fruit, but looks like it could be good for the environment in 10 years down the line. And there's an entire industry now in ESG. Now, it's not to say that I'm sure there are plenty of good companies out there in the ESG world who do mean well and do want to make the world a better place, but there are, as so many companies are just jumping on the bandwagon. There are many who are like, well, the new standard is you need to be ESG, because now you're getting passive index funds and active, and of course there are active managers who are saying, if you're not an ESG graded company, then we're not going to invest in you. You get all these lobbies now at universities for endowments and things saying, no more fossil fuels. We can't have anybody who makes fighter jets, etc., etc. And so there are less and less companies these days that are not ESG compliant, because it's just become the norm. You need to satisfy to some degree ESG. Yeah, Sam, very interesting on the short there. I think that's a very shrewd short. What would be your long for the week?
I remember watching. I messaged Boaz before we started, and I said, "Is it boring to be long Bitcoin?"
Not cool anymore, Sam. It's not cool.
I'm the broken record that keeps playing the same tune for a decade, and will continue playing the same tune for the next decade, I'm sure. I mean, I'm long Bitcoin. I don't know how I can't be. I don't know how anyone can't be. I still have people in our investment networks that still think that Bitcoin's going to zero, and it's just tulip mania and the South Sea bubble. And I don't know whether that just shows their ignorance or whether they genuinely believe that. Which, sometimes you just got to be a little bit open to other things. Anyway, I'm long Bitcoin because I can't see the central bank changing their ways. Even if they raise rates, that's going to have an issue on the economy that I think is still going to be positive for Bitcoin long term. I see demand picking up. We know that supply is constrained because it's in the code. We read the algorithms and it's in the code. So we know that there's only going to be a finite amount of whole Bitcoin, I should add. Like you said before, there will be a crossover point very soon, I think, actually, where we start looking at Bitcoin, not in Bitcoin sense, as in whole Bitcoin, but Satoshi, which is the smallest denomination of Bitcoin, as we explained earlier. 100 million Satoshi equals 1 Bitcoin. And so we'll start talking about people buying Bitcoin in Satoshi. There's that famous phrase that we use called stacking sats. So sats is another term for a Satoshi, and it just means to be, incrementally adding small amounts to your Bitcoin holding. And so I think just with inflation running riot, central banks being out of control with money printing, this is nothing new. They've been doing this for a long time. Bitcoin's been around as long as they've been doing it. And it has continued to be a very smart long-term play. And I am continuing to believe that it is going to continue to be a very smart long-term play. So I'm long Bitcoin.
Fair enough, Sam. Fair enough. I think that's anyone that knows you even remotely well these days knows that you are very much in the Bitcoin camp and shall remain so. And it is a very interesting time to be in Bitcoin. As you say, we have seen a lot of strength from Bitcoin in recent weeks. Both yourself and I, we both believe that this is to do with the Taproot upgrade, which is pretty much imminent at this point because it's only a few weeks out, and we'll be
almost exactly a month away. I think within about a 24-hour period, it's about a month away from now.
Right. I mean, this is going to be a pretty crazy month, I believe.
I think so.
And there will be some ripple effects, we think, from the Taproot upgrade, because it does have a lot of application. It will make Bitcoin much more. What would be the best word? Much more useful, I think, when it comes to making it more integrated with smart contracts. So Bitcoin is seen by a lot of people in the crypto space as being very backwards. This is very old school. You're using a steam engine when everyone else is riding around on rockets these days. Whereas it's my belief certainly that everybody who was involved in making Bitcoin, it could be a Satoshi, could have been a group of people, different discussion. But all the people who did contribute to it were well aware of the drawbacks of what the blockchain was, and they deliberately made the sacrifice of making it slightly slower, because everybody who does try and make things faster sacrifices a level of centralization and things like that. So this Taproot upgrade will make things a bit faster. There will be greater room for smart contracts, and will be more privacy. And both Sam and I believe that that's going to have not only an impact on Bitcoin, but on the wider crypto space. Now, we do have a couple of questions on this, Sam.
Sure.
Regarding energy efficiency for Bitcoin, will Taproot have any effect on that?
I don't believe so, no. But the energy discussion is an old discussion, again, that I would have hoped was probably knocked on the head, but a very significant amount of Bitcoin's network is using renewable energy. Bitcoin energy is probably, it's actually, you know what? It's probably one of the best things for the progress of renewable energy we've seen, even more so than something like electric cars. You need to be energy efficient to be a successful miner. So you need to reduce the cost of your energy inputs to as small as humanly possible. And that's why all miners are looking at how they can access cheap energy. And the cheapest way to do that is through renewable sources that many are doing at the point of mining, whether they be wind turbines, solar farms. El Salvador's literally using the energy, the geothermal energy from volcanoes to start mining Bitcoin. The energy discussion is a pretty silly one, because it's not going to rip the world apart and contribute some ungodly amount of carbon dioxide to the world that will kill us all. It's just not how it works at all.
Yeah, I think it's fair for people just to wonder about whether or not Bitcoin will become more energy efficient as a result of Taproot. Ernest, the chap who asked that, I would say I don't believe that this is going to it'll make Bitcoin more efficient, but not specifically more energy efficient. But if you imagine Bitcoin becoming more productive as a result, if you then divide that by the amount of energy that is being pushed into it, then yeah, I would say it will become more energy efficient. But we've yet to see what all of the consequences of that will be over time. Sam, an interesting question here on Binance. Do you have any thoughts, positive or negative, on Binance, the huge crypto exchange now, originally based out in China? Now I think they're out in Malta, formed by the enigmatic CZ, as he is known. What are your thoughts on Binance?
It's an open question. I mean, Binance is great if you want to be a trader, if you want to make any sort of crypto trade. I think they list more crypto than any other exchange in the world, a centralized exchange at least. They've got issues with blocking withdrawals. The banks don't particularly like allowing you to buy crypto through them, so there's issues with the banks connecting to Binance. There's issues with Binance withdrawal. Binance have their own apparently decentralized smart chain, which is cheap and cost effective, but it probably contains more scam coins and more spam coins than any other network, I think, in existence. They've got an NFT marketplace, which is cool, but it seems to be really limited. They've got a launch pad, which is great if you're, only hold their token and if you've been, on them for a certain amount of time. So it's a very closed off ecosystem. There's a lot of great things about Binance. They've brought a lot of awareness. They've brought a lot of people to the market. They contribute a lot to volume and trading and market making and all that kind of stuff. So there's good aspects of it, and there's aspects that they're really bad at and they're really crummy at. That others are doing far better, and others will steal us some of their market share. I don't know. They're good, they're bad, they're everything in between. I don't really hold a firm view on overall. You've got to look sort of a little bit smaller into what they do.
Yeah, it's such a large question, considering the number of things that Binance now does. It's a very large question to ask. But
sorry, I will also just add, they do have a very good educational resource. So if you're new to crypto, if you're still trying to get your head around a lot of the terms and functions and what it has, by all means, we provide a lot of educational resources, and through Exponential Investor and our publications, I think we are probably one of the market leaders, if not the market leader in the UK, about helping people to understand crypto and Bitcoin and what it really means, and really get away from just that mainstream mentality of it's only just about the price of Bitcoin. So in first instance, come to us, because why wouldn't you? But Binance is also a really good supplementary source for educational resources as well.
Yeah, they have made it very smooth, some of the onboarding process for new users at Binance. I was actually speaking to the founder of a decentralized exchange earlier on this week regarding what he thought about Binance, because it's almost like a sort of an elephant in the room. So decentralized exchanges are obviously, they're sort of trying to get away from the likes of Binance and from Coinbase and from PayPal, of course. And I was just wondering what's your take on Binance in general and some of their business practices and that. And it was I can't back up anything that he said, but he's a very, very influential guy, and he was saying, from his understanding, it's not a great place to work at, and he thinks some of the manner in which it was started, because it began in China, some of the business sort of culture there is much more sort of money oriented rather than beginning with sort of principles oriented, and he thought that was one of the reasons why Binance gets something of the sort of the bad rap that sort of very aggressive expansion and very sort of kind of warrior mentality when it comes to treating your competitors and things like that. It was quite interesting hearing about that. But Binance is too big to ignore. But very good question there. I mean, it's a very broad question. Do you have any thoughts on Binance, positive or negative? But no, a good nonetheless. One other question from DG Lucy says, where can I safely store cryptos for, say, 25 years for the grandchildren? Quarter century, Sam, what would you be using?
So I would be using a hardware wallet, and I would make sure that you have your seed phrase backed up onto an indestructible protection mechanism. So I use this one, and again, there's no commercial relationship or anything. I'm just telling you what I do. I use one called Bill Foddle, and it is literally like this indestructible. It's fireproof, it's shockproof, it's everything proof, which contains the seed phrase, and you just need to ensure that you store those in a place that you'll be able to access in 25 years. I wouldn't store it at home. I don't store mine at home, and I wouldn't suggest that you store yours at home if you're going to keep it for 25 years either.
Yeah, just to add some sort of context to some of that, if you're new to crypto, you may not be familiar with some of these terms. A hardware wallet is well, if you want to own any Bitcoin, you want to own it outside an exchange, as you should. You need to have a form of wallet. Hardware wallet is one which has been saved. It is stored on a physical device, a piece of hardware. And so the various different types of these, for example, Trezor is one of the main manufacturers of these. You also get them from Ledger. There are plenty of different manufacturers for them. My just general advice is, if you're buying one, you should buy direct from the manufacturer.
Absolutely.
Not through a third party, because then in theory somebody could have gone through it and tampered with it or something like that. So always buy direct from the manufacturer. And what you do with one of these, you set them up, and it will give you a seed phrase when you set it up. And what a seed phrase is a sequence of words. It's generally 12 to 24, though you can get longer ones if you want to be even more safe, even more complex. And what this is effectively the backup password to it, and it's very long. So it's 12 to 24 words, and they're completely random. So you're not going to be able to make a sentence out of them. So it's not going to be easy for somebody to crack. You can't, somebody couldn't just run through the full works of Shakespeare and hopefully find somebody's seed phrase in there. It's very, very much randomized. And so you have your hardware wallet, and then you have the backup seed phrase. You probably shouldn't store them in the same place just for extra security. And you should keep your seed phrase somewhere very, very safe, where somebody couldn't just come across it and be like, 12 random words, 24 random words kept in on a bookmark in a book somewhere. I wonder what this might be. Maybe I'll try backing up a hardware wallet with it, and because anybody with that seed phrase will be able to steal all of your funds. So you need to be very, very, very careful with it. But yes, DG Lucy, I would say a hardware wallet. Make sure it's a strong one. As Sam says, there are devices that have been created that allow you to store your seed phrase very, very safely and sort of indestructible as close as you can get to indestructible.
Yeah, I wouldn't chuck it into a volcano, for instance.
Yeah, yeah, you wouldn't want to try that. Wouldn't want to try that. That's certainly not what the El Salvadorans meant when they were starting their Bitcoin mining with their volcanoes. Sam, we are getting along for time at the moment. It has been a very good episode as ever. Did get a couple of questions here. This is from Ernest. Does the Taproot upgrade likely to affect other coins positively in terms of value increase? And James asked, is there any other crypto other than Bitcoin that you expect to boom after Taproot upgrade that we can recommend? Now, to James and to Ernest, the answer to that is yes, but not on this show. I'm afraid this is Southbank Live. We don't give financial advice here. If you are interested in learning more about that, however, and you can learn more about some of the other coins that we think will go up in value as a result of the Taproot rollout, you can hear about that more in the webinar that actually is linked below this video. If you just click in the description, there is a conversation that Sam and I have broadcast earlier this week, which is all about Taproot and what it might do not only for Bitcoin but for the broader crypto market. So have a look at that if you are interested. But Sam, any closing remarks for today's episode?
No, it's been fun.
A very good way to close it there. Very neat and to the point. Thanks to everybody who has watched this. If you're watching this live, thank you for all of the very interesting comments in the chat. It's been a very lively chat, which is always great to see. If you are watching a recording of this, do feel free to leave any of your comments below this video. We have sadly been targeted by some spam bots recently on some of the comments on the other videos, which is sad to see. But we do read all the comments that you leave beneath these videos. So if there's any topics you want discussed, any questions you want asked that I can then ask some of our in-house experts in future episodes, do feel free to do so. And of course, do subscribe and like the video because that helps us out very well. That's all for now. That was Southbank Live episode 16. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.